welcome to a special video about the planning and development of the New York Harbour Railroad display. We'll begin with some of the background and then we'll look at some of the schematics in blue brick. So as a starting point for any display that's been designed from scratch rather than one that's would have been pre-designed from a plan book or some other source, we have some requirements to lay down to get some general groundwork. So the runaround loop, which was I wanted on the display, should be capable of taking an entire train, and the train length for this is going to be a loco plus 4 cars plus a caboose. And an important point to note here is that these items for the period of the display would be 40 foot as an average. There should be multiple industries for a variety of cars to enable a wide variety of freight operations. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is multiple industries and one just deals in everything and the other two are just boxcars, but it does mean that there needs to be enough of a variety to maintain an interest, to give purpose to the display, and to make sure that it allows a cycling of different cars from different companies for different reasons. The layout should be interurban / trolley themed, and as a point of this, it is a little bit different from all the other Lego displays where it's either a modern city display or it's steam themed. You know, this is supposed to be early. Well, it's obviously designed from a motif of the 1930s and 40s, but it is something that I've not really seen common amongst most displays. It should be a constrained but with a very good city / urban feel, and this is very important as well because a lot of displays either want a very modern city or they go the other way and go for the time period I want to model, but more of a scenery sort of placid sort of display, and I want something which is the former but with the latter sort of time frame. And then lastly, there would be 9-volt track to power the electric locos and stockers applicable, meaning that, for example, the apron for the car float ferry would all be plastic track, meaning that the electric locos couldn't operate, meaning that you'd need to use reach cars or other freight cars available in the yard to pull or push cars on and off the car ferry. Again, with buildings and industries, you'd have the similar thing where you'd need to use reach cars to get into the industries themselves so that there wouldn't be any electrical sparking risk. Plus, the cost of overhead catenary maintenance. So here is some inspiration shots. This is the first one. This is of a city scene in New York. This is one that has been come from imbued with hues, so the colours in this are not exactly going to be 100% accurate, but it is a very, from what I've seen of photos, a very good view. It gives a nice variety, and you may notice that there is some reasonably standard colourings amongst the buildings. So there's what in Lego would either be a white or a tan for most of the buildings. Obviously the billiards one's got some green on it, but the more impressive and important thing to note with this is that you've got very good vintage road sign notices. You've got all the advertising and all the names of the buildings and the shops and the retail sort of side available, and it's a very good thing for this sort of thing. So you have that sort of research material available to create that sort of feel for the display. And then obviously this is another one. This is a New York car float operation. I can't remember where. It's a New York Central one, I believe. But the big thing here is it's the sense of busyness. You know, there's nothing moving in this photo, but it looks busy. There's a lot of stock there, and it just looks very industrial and very busy. And I believe about 1/5 of the way along in the photo, in the right-hand photo, I do believe that's the Empire State Building. I'm not entirely sure. But, it's that sort of feel I want for the car float ferry. So it's wooden timber deck. The rails are embedded, and it just looks rather busy and used. And then lastly, this is more the sort of the street running, the sort of interurban sort of display feel I wanted. And for those of you who are curious, this is actually a photo of the St John's Park Freight Terminal in Hudson Street, New York. Now, this original caption on the photo was said it was the 1900s. And the original comments on the Facebook post I lifted this from, and I'm sorry I don't have the origin, said that this, judging from the road vehicles and some of the box cars, put this in the 1920s. So this is slightly earlier than I want to model, but it is that sort of ethos of, the track's embedded, it's very much on the street, and it's just, a standard busy scene. But this is the sort of thing, I really want to model. It's the sort of your mundane sort of operations, but it's, for the stuff that's not available anymore, it's very interesting. And now we'll turn to Blue Brick to have a look at the displays in that. So now we've gone into Blue Brick now, and this before you is what actually started off the zenith of the New York Harbour Area display, and this was the grand idea, if you like, and this was to enable continuous running should it be required for a display. So it was designed so that it would be exhibitable. So on the top right corner here is a stockyard or a fiddle yard or staging area, and this would be where trains and trolleys would get changed as required to make or break down trains, so that trains could come on from either end of the track. And also this is nowhere near as developed as some of the other plans, but the general consensus is this was going to be a double track entrance and exit. So you'd have trains going up this side and coming onto the display the other, and this would be so that the traffic would be orientated to a certain degree. So trains are always coming on or off one way or the other, and obviously as trains would come on display from the east side, they'd come on. You could then change stock round as you wanted to. You've obviously got a warehouse here. This was originally designed to be a engine terminal, but this could also have been a small industry or an oil loading facility or an unloading facility of some kind. So it'd be two tracks. So you could possibly have one as unloading, one as a storage track, and again you've got a little spur off here, and this would have been a ship unloading point. So you would have been able to have a ship modelled here, a cargo ship of some description, and this track would have been for unloading or loading cargo on or off the boat. And you've got a long siding here that's next to the warehouse track, so this would have been a head shunt slash loading platform point. So you would have possibly had a ramp access here for loading vehicles and stuff on and off freight cars, and then this would have acted as a head shunt, so you could take a loco and a couple of cars up and then propel them back down one of the other tracks and things like that. And obviously to maintain a continuous run, you've got a cut across here, so this would have been a 3-track level crossing, and it wouldn't have been gated, so you would have just had signs up saying this is a 3-track crossing, proceed with caution, and obviously you would have had a flagman or something like that who would be out on the road, indicating to traffic that a loco was about to cross over, or a trolley in that case as well, because obviously trolley would have to continue a run. Now while the track extends down here, so while you have the track down here, this would have been for extended running. So if in future I wanted to extend the display southwards to maybe a terminus for trolley operations, you could have trolleys coming onto this display, coming down here, going over the yard area, and then turning round, and then coming back up, for example, just as a precaution. But this is the immediate idea, and it was supposed to be as well that this road here on the right of the display would match this left one here. So although they don't match physically, it was supposed to be that there was maybe a small S bend or something, and and the road name would be the same. So maybe you would have the intimate end of a junction here or something with some corner buildings, and you would have had a road name there. And again, you would have had a road here. And then this side, the display was going to be based on the coast. So obviously you've got the sea here. So obviously this would have been, again, sea or at least harbour side. So you wouldn't have necessarily needed much in the way of buildings here, and this would have been a public area. So, but obviously this never really came anywhere. And the other problem is it's so big, and it's, although it is good for continual run operation, in terms of actual operational interest, there's not really a lot here. There's obviously the warehouse and the boat unloading and possibly another industry here, but there wouldn't have been much traffic generating. It doesn't seem to be very interesting to me, and besides which, all the cutting of turnouts to create all this seemed a bit excessive. Obviously I have done some of this, but not all of it, and some of the geometry was a bit funky as well. And when I designed this display, we didn't have all the 9-volt PCs available we do now. FX Bricks, I don't think had started when I designed this, or this form of the display, or it was very early stages, so it was very much we don't know what was going on. So and next we come to these 3 displays. Now these 3 displays are technically the same display, but rearranged for 3 different modes. So the way this was going to happen was the core of the layout on the left was going to be the same, and then the right hand side would change based on what needed to be set up for the exhibition. So straight is very basic, so you have a straight display, straight up, straight down. Then you have one where it curves off to the right as it enters the storage area, and again one where it curves off to the left. And this one here where it curves off to the right is actually what was displayed at the Black Country Brick Show 2021, or possibly 2022, possibly 2022. And again, this has the warehouse sort of theme here. So we have the warehouse, we have the crossover track, and then we have the sort of the road crossing. We then have some more industry, we have a double crossing, and then we have a either a caboose track or a off-spot track, and then we have an industry lead here to serve an industry, and then this is your line in and out. And this is pretty much what's on all 3 displays, except for the difference is they've all been slightly changed to suit the area. So obviously this one, because it curves upwards, to get enough space in the storage yard or the staging yard, I've actually had to kink the track in slightly so it would then go up. And again, this one was what was displayed, but there were some problems with this. I hadn't got all the base plates configured. This display, I actually was going to change it, and I don't know, it's not on this blue brick file, but there was one somewhere where I'd actually set an industry up here, and this is actually the concrete warehouse, which I've partly got, although it will need some re-engineering and changing around at some point. But this is the one that was taken to Black Country Brick Show, and the others are different versions to suit the display. So it would have been that, you know, based on the area that was offered, it could be varied. So it could be just a standard straight display or a curved one, depending on what was required. Now obviously we now go over to the main one. So this is been updated. Now this doesn't have FX bricks turnouts. These are actually just blue brick stand-ins. So these are actually from the Tricks Bricks pack, but somebody on either Eurobricks or one of the Discord servers commented that the FX Bricks turnouts actually have the same matching points as the Tricks Bricks turnouts, which are the same as the Brick Tracks turnouts. So they're all technically the same toe and heel of the turnouts. It's just that the actual radius changes. So this is what's been configured. So we'll start off with this one. Now this is set up this is the most current version of the file, and I have got some variants which I will show shortly, but this is the primary one. So basically you would have a staging area down here, and trains would come on this track here, and then you've got it splits into a double track section as it goes around this curve, and then you've got a triple track section here, which then feeds off into various industries. So you have a curvature off here towards the trolley line, which would cross over the main line here. You've got your warehouse from the previous displays, and you've got a cargo-y sort of area here. You've also got a car float operation, which wasn't on the previous plans, but it is on this one. So you have a car float operation here, and obviously on the right hand side here you've actually got some industries, and there was going to be an industry that came off this top corner up on the right and went up into this area here. Now the big problem with that is that it would have been very inaccessible unless you had space at the back, and I didn't really want to make too tall an industry here, and it didn't really fit in. It wasn't really a long track. Once you'd come off the track here, unless you set it really far back and it ran at a very gentle angle, it kind of didn't make a lot of sense to be that crammed in. Besides which, I'd kind of got an idea of having this as the location of the Nighthawks painting cafe sort of thing, with some buildings here to match the picture as best as possible. So you would have actually had the Nighthawks diorama here that would look over the road, and this would have been a sort of set piece, so it would have been very identifiable to have that there. So it would have been a nice reference point, and I didn't really want to block this off just with an industry just for that purpose, so I decided to just take that industry out. It didn't really add a lot of it. Although it would have added another bit of interesting operation, it would have been a bit of a pain to operate to get it there. And the reason why you've got various radius here, so you've got some R40 and you've got some R56, especially for the inner one, is that R40 equates to 50 foot in 1:48 scale, and 50 foot is a quite tight radius. So there's one of the things where it's just like, it seems a bit tight, and realistically I could do with getting rid of R40 as much as possible off the display. Now obviously we do have R40 here, but as this is exclusively a trolley line that is passenger only, and the trolleys are designed to go around extremely tight corners, rather than the interurban stock, which isn't, this is perfectly fine. We can just set this off to one side. You know, it's a trolley use only. It doesn't really matter. So that's that. But for main interurban operation, and you know, for freight purposes, 40 is very tight. And although the Brickmile Railroader stock and Brick Train Depot stock, and I believe anybody else's files or instructions I've got would take R40, it does not look good taking R40. It looks very toy-like, and I want to try and get some realism, hence the adaptation of R40 here. Now the problem with the R56 rather here, so the big problem with that is that R56 takes up more space, hence why I've tried redesigning it to suit the display. Now the other bit of things here, so obviously we've got the car float, we've got the warehouse, it's down here for the third industry. So although the car float isn't technically an industry, it is a place where cars are exchanged on the railroad display. So for stock purposes and monitoring purposes, this is technically an industry. Although stock is taken off the display and exchanged, it is technically an industry because it is a business function, if you like. And the warehouse up here, along with the sort of like goods area in general, does with the loading and unloading of cars. So obviously you've got a bit of industry there. So this leaves this bottom right corner, and I've actually settled this as being a a regional meat processing plant. So what that means is that this doesn't actually deal with a lot of cattle. So what would happen is this would get in carcasses. So effectively the way it would happen is that the cattle and that sort of stuff would get killed at a main processing plant, get processed there, so the hides and some of the blood and all that sort of stuff would have been taken away, and the carcasses would be sent here for then sub-processing to then get delivered to the local markets. And then I'm going to do it so that this place still deals with chickens on site, but everything else arrives by refrigerated car. So the way this works is that raw supplies and chickens come in on this left-hand track. There's going to be a bridge over the main line here to this side, which is the outbound side. So the way it's going to be designed is that this is big enough to take 2 cars on the input and 2 cars on the output, and then the input side is actually a loop which you operate via the R68 turnouts here, and then you can pull stock in and out. So the way this is designed is that although this is not hands-free, it is pretty hands-free. So if I wanted to access a car down here on the loop, and I've got a little interurban engine, I can either pull the entire train out to take that car off and shove the train back in, or I can pretend that it's actually been taken out and left on the siding behind, off stage and off the main scenic area from the public side, so that I can then just hook it up, go around this R40 turnout, collect the car and bring it back on the display to be taken away, as a theory at least. So to get around this problem of this R40 curve, I've actually come up with some alternatives. So the simpler one, if you like, is just to say that in actual fact, because the loops are big enough already, we don't actually need this additional extra track to come around the corner. We can actually just terminate the track into just a standard R56 curve coming away here, which means that we can actually just have a yard ladder off this of 2 turnouts to give us our 3 tracks, and that then also gives us not only our main, which is actually technically this one, but we also have our loop track at the top here, and we also have our lead for the car float, which now actually makes it a longer car float lead, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But the problem with this option is that this really impacts how our yard area works, or how our industries work, because to get this R56 curve in here means, and being a 9-volt interurban line, means that to get both turnouts in to feed both the outbound and inbound sides of this industry means that the inbound track has had to be set off all the way down here, which either means I would have to extend the display downwards, and display, as you can see from you've seen on the main one, is already pretty big, which I don't really want to do, or it means severely hampering the inbound side so that it's not really good aesthetically. It's not necessarily bad, but it means that the approach into the building would either have to be at an angle, or would have to extend the building so far in that it would have to come in at an angle to unload, and I don't really want that. I want a nice straight flush entry, if you like. So this is a neat idea. It does dispense with the R40 inside curve, but it's just too big a takeaway for the inbound industry track. So I didn't really want to do this, and this is the other option here. So I'll just move this down, and this is possibly the way this will go. So I'll just move this up here so you've got a bit of comparison. So here's the current one, the R40 and the R56 superimposed, and this is the other alternative. And what this does is that this maintains our double track all the way around the corner. So this could theoretically be a bi-directional operation, so you've actually got an inbound track and an outbound track, or it could be you've got a east facing track and a west facing track, so you could actually have trains come in west facing on one track and east facing on the other. It just gives you a lot of opportunity. But what this does is it does actually grant you a really reasonably good lead to this industry. You don't actually lose anything on the approach to the industry. So as you can see here, we've got the equivalent of 2 straight track sections, and we've got these similar here. In actual fact, this one actually gives you a little extra before the curve. Now obviously this isn't entirely accurate because we'd need the diversion curve from FX bricks, but this sort of gives you the idea. So we'd still maintain a crossover, although it's now facing the opposite way. Instead of being a left hand crossover as it is here, it's actually a right hand, and we actually have a right hand one here. So all this is left hand turnouts, all this is right hand turnouts, and this actually, to me, makes for a far neater application of said turnouts. The only problem being is that this then impacts our tracks. So instead of us having a divergence for the outbound track, we actually have it actually diverts to rejoin the main line. Now this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because if this is supposed to be the main line track, even on the other display or the original format, we actually were going straight off into the inbound side from that turnout. So the turnouts would just have to be set the other way. But I like this one. It's the only problem is that with this being in a factory location, this now means that if a factory is at the back, it would have no room to expand. Oh, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It does add a nice scenic block to the display. So this is probably what I'll go with. This does change the amount of turnouts I'd need slightly, but this does maintain the nice double track formula. It now means that I've actually got a wider radius at the back here as well. So instead of R56, I've got R72. Which should be another box of track I need to buy, but never mind. It's something different. But yeah, that's the option. So obviously with that here, the staging area would stay the same, but I'd still have all the track as previously. Obviously I mentioned staging yards, so as a final point, this is a bit all over the place, but that's how we do things. So obviously you have a staging area here. The display is actually set up so you can actually have a second staging yard off this side here. So this is obviously designed to be multiple purpose, so you can actually have a staging area on both ends, but for if you have a cut down display, so you don't necessarily have room for a full staging yard, you can actually have a turnout and 2 pieces of track, and this would actually suffice enough for trolley operations maybe. So you could have 2 trolleys and they can come on and off the display as required, or maybe this is a loco servicing point, so you can actually take locos off as a sheddy sort of area, which would actually make sense if this is a terminus point. You might be having trains start or finish here, especially as you've got a car float operation, and if this is a very intensive car float operation because you've only got the one ferry, again would add impetus to you having maybe a small shed in the vicinity to service locos, even if they're electric and don't actually take a lot of servicing. But yeah, so that's a little bit of a workaround, if you like, and having a look at all the displays. So I hope you've enjoyed it. It's certainly been a bit of a different video to normal, but yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed it, and if you've got any questions, drop them below. But that's it for now, and see you later.